Hello, students of History 111, History of the Middle Ages. So in this course, we are going to examine a enormous geographical area, which is the Old World. And we're going to be looking at a particular temporal focus, which is really the Middle Ages. So when you have to ask yourself when you come into a class that's entitled the Middle Ages or medieval history, what is the Middle Ages? Well, I think it comes from a particular Western focus, that it is looking at a period of time that people in the Renaissance, right, this period of from 1400 to 1600, that they were looking at this as being a particular time in history, that from about 500 AD to 1500 AD, that it was really kind of a dark age, if you will, a time where there was very little light in the world. They saw on one side the great classical period of Rome and the brilliance of Latin oratory, and then they saw their own time and the rebirth of art and of thinking, of great Latin writing, of prose. And they saw this as being a return to this classical era, that there was light on the origins in the time of Rome, and there was a period of darkness, 1,000-year period of darkness, where all of this learning and art and beauty in the world had gone out, and it was just simply a very dark time. And they had brought this back in Italy. So the name of this course is very Western centric, but we're going to be examining a period of a period of time that is more than focused on just this traditional Western Europe. Right? We're going to be looking at Africa. We're going to be looking at the growth of civilizations in East Asia. And we're going to examine how a multitude of developments, of technological developments, of cultural developments really came to transform this world of the Middle Ages, if you will. And as we go through these civilizations and these times, you're not going to be familiar with a lot of this stuff, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be, you're going to get through this, and we're going to learn a lot about this, and we'll be working through this together through discussions and through the readings in your course texts. But I wanted to just take a moment and to talk about this course that we're going to be going through, and I just wanted to introduce myself as I'm your professor for these next few weeks. And I am obviously a historian by training, but specifically historians really focus in on particular geographic and temporal areas. And I am by training a Europeanist. Specifically, I work in England, in medieval England. And I have focused really in on religious development and the development of church history through most of my career. And I have done archaeology in the Middle East. I have traveled all over Europe and the ancient world, and so I'm excited to bring this course to you and to shed some light and to give some of this knowledge that I have learned to you, and I hope also to learn from you, as well as we all have our own particular perspectives on the world, and we all have our own unique expertise to bring. So I encourage you to bring this to this class. And the ultimate goal of this course is learning how to read, write, and think critically through the medium of history. So we will, of course, be learning about history, but I want you to learn how to analyze, how to think critically, just simply through using this history as a medium. That we can hone these skills of becoming better writers that you can take to any career that you do, whether it be nursing, teaching, or being an engineer. Being a good critical thinker and writer can never hurt you. And these are the skills, the really core skills that we're going to implement. And we also want you to learn something about how we came to where we are, this cultural makeup of our own history. And I would like you to, of course, familiarize yourself with the syllabus. I would like you to familiarize yourself with the textbook and get everything up and functioning. And take a moment and just simply look over some maps of the ancient world. Google it and just search around and have some fun with that. I'm kind of nerdy. I guess I look at maps and just enjoy it and can do it for half an hour. But to do some familiarizing yourself with the maps of the ancient world. And just look over this, because these are going to be the areas that we're going to be talking about. And anytime when you take a history course, or anytime you take any course, you should ask yourself, well, what is sociology? What is engineering? What is history? And I think there's about four definitions really that I can give to you about what is history. What is this thing that we are doing? And number one, it is facts. It's just everything that's happened. As one famous historian coined the phrase, it's just one damn thing after another. So that's one particular cynical definition of history. Another one, a better one, might be a study of causes and ends. All right, so historians are going to look at why something happened and how it affected society. We are studying change, and this is why we really preface change and periods of great change and transformation in human cultures and societies. Thirdly, it can be considered an interpretive social science. That we're going to look at the world and we're going to analyze it. We're going to see how things work and function, and through this, we're going to learn how to read, write, and think critically about how events of the world happened and how particular changes affected society and why these things happen within their own context. And then fourth, I think history is really an art and a philosophy in many ways. It is about telling a beautiful story about the past, about explaining things, but also it can be considered to be kind of a poetry, an art, if you will, of telling a tale of a particular people or a culture or an event. And this is the true skill of the historian is being interesting, right? Don't It's just not one damn thing after another, but rather you have got to make the past come alive through recounting these events and explaining them to your listeners. So when a historian uses his or her skills, she's going to employ a particular methodology. The historian is going to ask a question there about whatever event that they're studying, or time or period or person, and then they're going to study the topic. They're going to investigate, they're going to do some spading, they're going to read, and then they're going to form a hypothesis or a thesis about what they think. Then they're going to bring in evidence from the time period that they're studying, and they're going to marshal this evidence within a written argument. And then they're going to submit this argument for critique among their peers, other experts who have studied this particular field. And this is what we call peer review. And this is how the historian does their work. And the historian specifically is going to use primary and secondary sources within their work. What is a primary source? A primary source is anything from a ancient contemporary context. So if you are studying ancient Egypt, or you are studying Rome or the Middle Ages, you are going to read things written about ancient Egypt from that specific time period. And the closer to the event you can get, the better the evidence usually is, and the stronger the evidence is. Now, you can use written documents, and really history is mostly about written documents, but you can also employ things like art. You can employ things like archaeology, material culture, and even oral culture if you are studying a more modern time period within your examination. A historian also uses secondary sources, which are things written by people like myself, who are observers from the long future and long into the future, and we are studying these events. And we are writing things about them, right? We're writing books or articles regarding the events, and this is what we call modern scholarship, or the secondary sources. So these are the kind of two evidences that historians use within their work. And I hope that you will get a chance here within this course to look at a little bit of both of these and see how historians can do their work. So we also need to ask ourselves, well, why do we do this thing, history? While it is the art and science of explaining the past, we approach the past through kind of our own lens. And how we do this, or how we have done this over the past 150 years, has changed radically. We have seen in the past, in the 18th, 19th century, this thing we call the grand narrative, where we focus on the development of a particular core story of a nation state and its great men and I do mean men, great men of politics, and statesmen and things like that. That it's just simply a great political narrative about the great figures that made a society the way it was clear up into the present. That they would start all the way back in the Middle Ages, and they would tell the tale of the great men who formed the political society that we live in currently, and the glories of the nation state. And then the world wars happened because kind of within this grand narrative is a notion of progress, that nations are always making progress. They are progressing to be better and better and better. Well, and then the world wars happened in Europe. And history really became a professional discipline about 1870, where you really start seeing a professor of history. And departments of history within England. And they were telling this tale of progress, but the world wars happened and destroyed all of Europe, and so therefore it really threw a kink in this argument about a continuously progressing society that was going to eventually be so good that it would root out all evil. And historians took note of this, and they then began to examine history. Well, from a different perspective. They wanted to look at history from below, that they weren't so interested anymore in the great men who made society, because it was these great men who, of course, destroyed society in World War I and World War II, the monarchs, the kings, the political leaders, and rather they became interested in the common people, right? They needed to tell the story of the people who really made society, who did most of the working and thinking and living and dying within society. And we call this social history. And this really came of age really after World War I and really after World War II. And along with this social history, then there began to be a broadening of focus, that the people began to say, well, yes, we need to look at history from below, but we also need to look at women's role in history, because this has been vastly ignored and overlooked for many, many generations. So there became a new focus on women's history and gender studies. Finally, in the 1970s and 80s, there's something they call the anthropological turn, that historians began to say, we can't understand societies in the Middle Ages or the ancient times through our own lens of industrial society, that we need to go out and we need to observe primitive cultures in Africa or the Amazon rainforest, and we can then apply this anthropological methodology, and we can then understand these earlier societies in history through the lens of modern anthropological or observation. So through anthropological observation, we can shed light on the beliefs and practices of ancient societies that make utterly no sense to us. And then finally, we kind of have this postmodern school of thinking, and that is that it is, I think, for the benefits of history, it is more than just this, but postmodernism is really highly critical reading of texts, and it's very skeptical of your ability to be able to perceive what people mean or what something means just based upon observation. You can't understand something outside of its cultural context, or really even you can't understand something that someone else says entirely. You can't be sure that you know what this person thinks or means when they say something. For instance, when you come up to a stop sign, you should still be sitting there in your car, because it says stop, which in the English language means halt. But in reality, it means pause. So postmodernism has taught us to be very, very critical of how we read texts and how we understand things from the past, to not take things at face value, but to really examine it thoroughly and deeply. So this is how historians have kind of done their work and how they have approached topics. And now we really specialize, instead of doing grand narratives, we specialize in really highly focused, hyper focused areas in cultural history, and or something very small that we know a lot about a little and a little about a lot. So historians have gone about doing their work in these ways, and that's kind of mind numbing in some ways to go through this historiographical methodology. But there is something that is so important in historical training, and for the purposes of this course, I encourage you to have imagination, because you're going to read about cultures and try to understand things that you are totally unfamiliar with and seem very strange to you, and you're going to have to write about them. So you have to deploy imagination. So you have to really put your thinking cap on and dig into this subject matter, and really ponder how would you have done something as an ancient would have done it, or why do the ancients think a particular way that we just simply don't. So welcome to the course. I'm excited to have you here, and I look forward to us getting to work together throughout this semester. So take care, and I will see you next time.